According to the 2022 constitution, Tunisia is a presidential republic with a bicameral parliament, but most powers are concentrated in the presidency. International and domestic observers assessed that December parliamentary elections were well administered technically but lacked legitimacy and fell short of international standards. The elections were marked by low turnout, approximately 11%, and the introduction in September of an electoral law that eliminated quotas for women and youth, resulting in lower women's representation. President Zayed was elected in 2019 in the country's second democratic presidential election, and official election observers generally agreed the 2019 election had no widespread fraud, violence, or attempts to undermine the credibility of the results. The Ministry of Interior is responsible for law enforcement. The ministry oversees the National Police, which has primary responsibility for law enforcement in the major cities, and the National Guard, which oversees border security and patrols smaller towns and rural areas. Civilian authorities maintained effective control over the security forces. There were reports security forces committed some abuses. Military courts, with civilian judges nominated by the president and approved by the Military Judicial Council, have authority to try cases involving only military personnel and civilians accused of national security crimes or crimes involving members of the security or armed forces, including insulting the armed forces or the president, given his role as commander-in-chief. On February 10, President Zayed dissolved the Supreme Judicial Council, which had been in charge of nationwide judicial appointments and discipline. He replaced it with a provisional council. On March 30, the president formally dissolved the already suspended parliament after 116 members held a virtual plenary and voted to annul all decree laws issued by the president since he suspended the constitution in July 2021. In a July 25 referendum, 94.6% of voters approved the new constitution, much of which the president personally drafted. The constitution concentrates powers in the presidency, removes checks and balances on the executive, weakens the parliament, and gives the president enhanced authorities over the judiciary and the legislature. While the Constitution contains provisions like the 2014 Constitution enshrining fundamental freedoms and human rights, problematic developments called into question the government's commitment to those rights, particularly related to freedom of expression and media. Most political parties boycotted the referendum and turnout was approximately 30%, significantly lower than in prior elections. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of torture by government agents, arbitrary arrests or detentions, serious problems with the independence of the judiciary, serious restrictions on freedom of expression and media, including arrests or prosecutions of journalists, censorship, or enforcement of or threat to enforce criminal libel laws to limit expression, government corruption, discrimination and societal abuses. Crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex persons, laws criminalizing consensual same-sex sexual conduct between adults and the enforcement of those laws, and the worst forms of child labor. The government took steps to investigate officials who allegedly committed abuses, but investigations into abuses by police, security forces, and detention center officials lacked transparency and frequently encountered long delays and procedural obstacles. High-profile investigations into former government officials, members of parliament, and businesspersons on corruption charges also lacked transparency.